Royal Enfield is not giving you a deal. Nobody hands over a $4,000 motorcycle out of kindness. And if you think you are getting away with something, you are wrong. Somewhere on this bike, a corner got cut to make that price work. And today we are exposing every single one of them, starting from the smallest sacrifice and ending with the cut you will notice the moment you throw a leg over the seat. By the end, you will know exactly what you are paying for and exactly what you are not. Heating up silently. At number 8, the cooling system got the axe. Pop the fairing off almost any modern European rival, and you will find a small radiator, a maze of coolant hoses, a thermostat, and a water pump, quietly doing the thankless work of keeping the engine from overheating. Royal Enfield looked at all of that hardware and said, "Thanks, but no thanks. The engine here is AIR cooled, full stop, relying on old-fashioned fins and moving air instead of plumbing and electronics." Think about what a liquid cooling system actually costs a manufacturer to include. It is not just the radiator itself. It is the coolant reservoir, the sensor that tells the dashboard. The engine is overheating, the electric fan that kicks on in traffic, the hoses that eventually crack with age, and the labor required to bleed air out of the system properly on the assembly line. Every single one of those parts is a line item, and every line item is a few more dollars added to the sticker price before the bike ever reaches a showroom. Cutting the whole system out is not laziness, it is arithmetic. What you lose is horsepower and thermal consistency. The engine only makes about 20 horsepower out of 349 cubic centimeters, a modest number by modern standards, especially next to a liquid-cooled rival, squeezing closer to 30 horsepower out of a similar displacement. Sit in gridlock traffic on a hot day, and you will feel the engine radiating heat directly onto your legs because there is no radiator fan pulling that thermal load away and dumping it out the front of the bike. Long, sustained highway pulls in. Extreme heat will also see the engine lean on its ignition, timing to protect itself, quietly trimming a bit of performance right when you want it most. Here is the twist, though. For a casual commuter, this is barely a loss at all. There is no coolant to leak onto your driveway, no radiator to crack after a minor tip over in a parking lot, and no thermostat quietly failing at 70,000 miles and leaving you stranded on the shoulder, waiting for a tow truck. The low-stress engine was built from the ground up to shrug off heat, and it asks for zero cooling system maintenance in return, no flushes, no leak checks, no fan relay to eventually die on you. So which decision actually costs more down the road? The bike that needs a radiator flush every couple of years, or the one that never had a radiator to begin with? That question sets up the next cut nicely, because suspension tells a similar story with a very different ending. Are you the kind of motorcycle enthusiast who loves a good deal? Before you buy your next bike, there is something you genuinely need to know first. Imagine standing in front of a bike you want, the seller swearing it's perfect. That's where riders overpay by thousands on a $10,000 bike. Our buyer's kit tells you what it's really worth, your fair price, and when to walk away. A wrong bike costs thousands. This kit, just $49. The easiest money you'll ever save. Scan the QR on the right or tap the link in the description. Let's get that bike you've always wanted for even cheaper. Now moving on to number 7, staying quiet. At number 7, the suspension is strictly business class and not first class. European and Japanese 350s love to show off with upside-down front forks and multi-way adjustable rear shocks, the kind of hardware that lets a rider dial in compression and rebound down to the click, chasing a perfect setup for their weight and riding style. Royal Enfield skipped all of that and fitted basic, right-side-up telescopic forks paired with a non-adjustable rear shock, no fine-tuning knobs anywhere in sight. There is a manufacturing story hiding behind this too. Upside-down forks are not just a performance upgrade, they are a machining challenge. The upper tubes have to be larger in diameter to house the internals. The seals have to be more precise to prevent leaks under higher loads. And the whole assembly typically costs several times more to produce than a conventional right-side-up fork. Multiply that cost across the volume Royal Enfield builds at. likely well over 500,000 units a year across its lineup. And a fancier fork alone could add real dollars to every single bike that rolls off the line. The result on the road is a front end that feels a touch harsh over sharp-edged potholes and a touch soft and wallowy when you push it hard into a fast, decreasing radius corner. There is no dialing anything in for your specific body weight, your riding style, or your favorite twisty back road. What ships from the factory is what you ride forever, unless you start swapping springs and fork oil weights yourself, which most owners never bother doing. Does that actually matter? It depends entirely on what kind of rider you are. If you are the type who attacks canyon roads on a Sunday morning, trying to drag a peg, the budget suspension will feel loose and a little unnerving underneath you, especially under hard braking into a corner where the forks can dive more than you would like. But if this bike's real job is simply getting you to work and back at sane speeds, soaking up city potholes and speed bumps along the way, the ride is perfectly composed and totally predictable. The suspension tells you a lot about who this bike is built for. The dashboard, on the other hand, tells you even more about who it was not built for in our next entry. Dimming stubbornly at number 6, the dashboard that time-traveled back to 2005. Modern rivals are shipping full-color TFT displays with lean-angle sensitive traction control, switchable ride modes, and a throttle that talks to a computer instead of a cable. Royal Enfield gave this bike a mechanical throttle cable and a small analog speedometer paired with a tiny monochrome LCD fuel gauge that looks like it escaped from a flip phone a couple of decades ago. The electronics gap runs deeper than just the screen. A ride-by-wire throttle body alone, with its position sensors and the software to manage it, can add a meaningful chunk to a bike's production cost. And that is before you even count the lean angle sensor, the inertial measurement unit, and the wiring harness needed to connect all of it to a traction control computer. Royal Enfield is essentially selling you 1990s switchgear logic, wrapped in a 2020-something body, and the savings from skipping an entire electronics suite are not small. What you are giving up is a genuine safety net in the wet. There is no onboard computer standing by to catch the rear tire if it breaks loose on a painted crosswalk line or a patch of oil, and there is nothing resembling tech bragging rights to flash at a stoplight next to a rider on something newer. There is also no quick shifter, no cruise control, and no smartphone connectivity to speak of on the base trims, features that are becoming near standard on rivals in this price bracket. Here is the reasonable part though. With only 20 horsepower on tap, this engine simply does not have enough muscle to easily overwhelm the rear tire's traction in the first place, wet road or dry, and that mocked little analog gauge remains stubbornly easy to read in bright direct sunlight, with exactly zero firmware to glitch out on you mid-ride, freeze on a boot screen, or need an update pushed to it before you can even start the engine. If this cut shocked you, number 5 is where it gets a little crazier. Enjoying breakdowns like this? Hit that subscribe button. Subscribing means the rest of this channel's buyer guides land straight in your feed. No digging required. Bulking needlessly, at number 5, the aluminum got swapped for steel. Rivals in this class lean hard on lightweight aluminum alloy for wheels, swing arms, foot peg brackets, and handlebars, because shaving rotating mass is one of the fastest ways to make a bike feel alive under your hands. Royal Enfield went the opposite direction, entirely fitting heavier cast alloy wheels and thick tubular steel in places where aluminum usually lives on a Pricer machine. This decision connects directly back to where the factory sits. Steel is dramatically cheaper to source and work with than aircraft-grade aluminum, and tubular steel frames can be welded by trained technicians using comparatively simple jigs rather than requiring the more specialized casting and machining processes that aluminum frames demand. It is a decision that trades raw material cost and labor simplicity directly for weight, and in a factory built around high-volume, cost-conscious manufacturing, that trade makes perfect sense on a spreadsheet even if it does not make sense on a racetrack. You feel this one immediately and not in a subtle way. The bike weighs roughly 402 pounds, which is nearly 66 pounds heavier than an aluminum-heavy rival like Honda's CB300R. Every ounce of that extra steel shows up in slower, heavier, more deliberate steering, especially threading through tight traffic lanes or muscling the bike backward out of a parking spot. It also shows up in acceleration, since that extra weight is fighting against the same modest 20 horsepower engine discussed a few cuts ago, meaning 0 to 60 times land noticeably behind lighter competitors. This is one of the rare spots on this list where the honest answer is simply, yes, it matters. The heft is real, it is noticeable on day one, and it never fully disappears no matter how many miles pile onto the odometer. But weight distribution and steel bones can only tell you so much about a bike's character, and the real personality question actually starts inside the engine itself, which is exactly where the next decision lives. Our next entry tells you exactly what it is. Doubling cleverly at number 4, one engine that wears 4 different costumes. Instead of engineering a dedicated purpose-built motor for every single model in the lineup, Royal Enfield built one engine platform, the 349cc J Series, and dropped it into 4 completely different bikes: the Hunter, the Classic, the Bullet, and the Meteor, each wearing wildly different bodywork over identical mechanicals underneath. This is where the volume argument really starts to pay off. Designing, testing, and homologating a single engine for emissions and safety standards across multiple markets is an enormously expensive process, often running into tens of millions of dollars. Once you count durability testing, dyno hours, and certification paperwork for every country the bike will be sold in. Spread that one-time cost across 4 different models instead of developing 4 separate engines, and the cost per bike drops dramatically. It is the same logic car manufacturers use when one engine shows up under the hood of 3 or 4 different badges in a showroom. What that costs you is mechanical personality. This engine accelerates, vibrates, sounds, and shifts exactly like a cruiser or a classic retro machine, no matter which body panels are wrapped around it. So a bike styled to look like a sporty urban roadster still feels, underneath the paint, exactly like its cruiser cousin parked 2 spots over. There is a long-stroke, low-revving character baked into every one of these bikes, for better or worse. And it shows up whether you bought the one that looks like a scrambler or the one that looks like it belongs outside a 1950s diner. But here is why that platform sharing decision is actually the smartest move on this entire list. Because Royal Enfield manufactures millions of this exact same engine, quality control has had years to mature. Replacement parts are cheap and everywhere, even at small independent shops far from an official dealer, and the mechanical bugs that plague a brand new platform were ironed out long before your particular bike ever rolled off the line. That same keep it simple and proven philosophy runs straight through to the brakes in our next entry, though this is where the trade-off gets noticeably harder to shrug off. But wait, before you sign anything at the dealership, there is one more thing worth knowing. Now let's get back to the video. Picture it, you buy the bike. It looked clean, it sounded great. 3 weeks later, the bills start: a worn chain, tired forks, a service the seller never mentioned. That's thousands gone on a bike you already paid full price for. Our inspection checklist catches every one of those before you pay, walking the bike like a mechanic. Spend $49 now or lose thousands later. Scan the QR on the right or tap the link in the description. Don't let a hidden problem drain your wallet. Squeezing weekly at number 3, the brakes that are generic and not name brand. Premium rivals bolt-on name brand, 4-piston radial calipers from the likes of Brembo, paired with adjustable master cylinders that let you fine-tune exactly how the lever feels under your fingers before the pads even bite. Royal Enfield instead fits generic, floating 2-piston ByBre calipers, which is Brembo's budget sub-brand, built specifically for cost-sensitive markets like India and Southeast Asia, attached to a rigid lever with no adjustment whatsoever. ByBre exists for exactly this reason. It lets a manufacturer put a recognizable, trusted name near the brake system without paying for the full radial mount, multi-piston hardware that shows up on a super sport or a premium naked bike. The calipers still clamp the rotor and the dual-channel ABS still prevents a locked wheel, but the feel at the lever and the outright stopping power under hard use are both a step below what a rider on a pressure machine would be used to. The consequence shows up the first time you actually need to stop in a hurry. The brakes feel distinctly wooden or mushy at the lever, and stopping quickly demands a hard, full-hand squeeze rather than the light two-finger pull riders on pre-shear machines get used to. Riders coming from a modern sport bike or a premium naked bike often describe the first few emergency stops on one of these as genuinely alarming, simply because the initial bite arrives later and with less urgency than muscle memory expects. This is a case where the honest answer is yes, it genuinely matters, even with dual-channel ABS standing guard against a locked wheel. The lack of sharp initial bite can feel unnerving the first time you need to grab a fistful of brake in a real emergency, and new riders in particular will need to actually practice pulling that lever aggressively in a controlled parking lot setting before they ever need it for real on a public road. Brakes are about stopping the bike. Staying loyally at number 2, the parts bin that stays local on purpose. Premium manufacturers lean on international supply chains, sourcing specialized components from Japan, Germany, and Italy, often shipping half-finished assemblies across oceans before final assembly even begins. Royal Enfield flips that model on its head, sourcing 99% of the bike's raw materials, rubber, plastics, and electrical wiring locally from inside India, keeping the entire chain close to home from raw steel to finished motorcycle. This is arguably the single biggest lever behind the whole $4,000 price tag. Import duties, international shipping, and currency conversion all add hidden costs to a bike built with foreign components, and Royal Enfield sidesteps almost all of it by building nearly the entire supply chain domestically. Combine that with labor costs in India that are a fraction of manufacturing labor costs in Japan or Western Europe, and you start to see exactly how a company can undercut a rival by thousands of dollars without simply selling the bike at a loss. The trade-off shows up in the small details you touch every single ride. The rubber hoses look basic and utilitarian. The plastic switchgear on the handlebars has a slightly cheap, clicky feel under your thumb. And if you go digging under the seat, you will find the paint finish in hidden, unseen areas is noticeably thinner than what a Japanese factory would ship. None of it is going to fail on you, but all of it is a quiet reminder that corners were drawn somewhere, even if not in the places that actually keep you safe. And yet, this decision does not actually cost you much in practice. Keeping the supply chain local slashes. The purchase price and sidesteps import tariffs entirely, and while those plastics might feel cheap to the touch, they are thick, genuinely weather-resistant, and rarely the reason a Royal Enfield ends up in a repair shop. Everything up to this point has been about what is hiding under the bodywork. The final cut is the bodywork itself, and it is the one decision you will notice before you even throw a leg over the seat. Bearing boldly at number 1, the fairing that never made the cut. Look at a European sport tourer in this class, and you will usually find a front windscreen, an aerodynamic fairing, an engine belly pan, and interlocking plastic body panels wrapping the whole machine in a cocoon designed in a wind tunnel. Royal Enfield ships this bike as essentially a naked frame, with a metal fuel tank and 2 small plastic side pods, and basically nothing else standing between you and the wind. Bodywork is deceptively expensive to produce well. Every faired panel needs its own injection mold, its own paint pass, and its own set of mounting brackets and fasteners, and a full fairing kit can easily represent dozens of individual pieces that all have to fit together with tight, rattle-free tolerances. Skipping the fairing entirely does not just save on plastic, it saves on tooling costs, paint booth time, and the labor required to align and fasten every panel during final assembly. The obvious loss is wind protection once speeds climb. Push past 70 miles per hour, and your torso essentially becomes a sail, generating serious wind buffet, extra helmet noise, and real rider fatigue on anything resembling a long highway stretch. There is also no belly pan to protect the underside of the engine from road debris, so a rock kicked up on a gravel shoulder has a clearer path to expensive parts than it would on a fully faired machine. But context matters enormously here, because this bike tops out around 75 miles per hour to begin with. It was simply never built to be a highway missile. For city speeds under 56 miles per hour, that missing bodywork actually works in your favor, keeping the bike narrower, easier to park, and far simpler to clean after a rainy commute, with no plastic panels to crack the first time it tips over in a parking lot. Add it all up: the air cooling, the basic suspension, the analog dash, the steel instead of aluminum, the shared engine platform, the budget brakes, the local sourcing, and the missing fairing, and none of it reads as a manufacturer cutting corners out of laziness. It reads as a company that understood exactly what a rider actually needs at this price point and cut everything else without apology. That is the full breakdown of how a $1,000 gap gets closed, decision by decision, without a single shortcut that actually undermines the bike's core job. Understanding the why behind a cheap price tag is the difference between buying with confidence and buying with your fingers crossed. If this video showed you something you didn't know about Royal Enfields, click the next video on your screen right now to continue riding with us. We have even more videos exposing motorcycle secrets like this one. Don't forget to like this video and make sure you join our tribe by clicking that subscribe button.